So welcome everyone to New York Buddha Dharma. We like to start with a bow. And since there are a few new people here tonight, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the kind of practice that we do here. It goes by different names, depending on your orientation. And in the pure sort of space practice that we do, of being aware of the space of this room, this present moment, that really is what we call vipassana, or awareness practice. The element of working with the breath, of being aware of something very specific and precise, like the breath going out into the space, that is what we call a shamatha practice. Shamatha is the practice of focusing the mind one-pointedly on an object. When one first comes to meditation practice, one does shamatha practice solely. So you might just work with the breath, and in that instance you might be practicing with your eyes closed. That's often done with shamatha. And you're just focusing on the breath coming in and going out, back and forth. Sometimes this practice is called mindfulness practice, because we are waking up from dreaming. And the main virtue of this practice, shamatha, is twofold. On the one hand, it shows us the extent to which we are often, so often, lost in thoughts. Until we begin to try and focus our minds one-pointedly on the breath, it's much more difficult to be aware of the extent to which we're lost in thought. And in fact, I think most people who aren't meditators, who walk down the street and live their lives, are really spending their lives lost in reflection, in thought. And when one does that, one very much identifies with one's thoughts as being me, and of being of utmost importance, and really of being all there is to how one lives one's life, all the direction that one might get. So that's one of the main virtues of doing this shamatha practice. The second virtue is that we get a rest. Thought is very strenuous. It involves hope, fear, anxiety of all sorts, thoughts about the future and the past, and it's tiring. So when we bring the mind one-pointedly back to an object, as we do in shamatha, we get a rest from that kind of fundamental anxiety that animates our thoughts. In the book that we're teaching up at the Westchester Buddhist Center right now, which I recommend to anyone, it's called Our Pristine Mind, by a teacher named Organ Chögyam, which is probably hard to remember, but you can remember Our Pristine Mind. And he talks about that rest that you get in shamatha as being a bit better than a good nap. And that's the main virtue of doing shamatha practice, focusing one-pointedly on an object, often with the eyes closed, that there's this twofold benefit, which is an important one. But pretty soon, we want to move beyond that into something more profound and fundamental. And that brings us to vipassana practice, it's called in Sanskrit, usually translated as awareness practice or sometimes insight meditation. And that has to do with the twofold aspect of mind. there is what is called in this book that I'm recommending, Our Pristine Mind. He translates it as pristine mind. In the Chögyam, Great Perfection Teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, that term is, the Tibetan for it is sometimes translated as non-dual awareness that is primordially pure, primordially before time. The term in Tibetan is kadak rigpa. Ka is the first letter of the Tibetan alphabet. So it indicates sort of primordialness, before anything else. And dak means purity. Pure of what? Pure of subject and object. There's no subject and object. And rigpa is the knowingness. It's the quality of mind that sees beyond confusion. And what that means is simply this, that our fundamental knowingness, your ability to know what's going on right now, here in this room, this voice, the things that you're seeing, the bodily sensations that you're feeling, maybe some taste in your mouth from dinner, who knows what, and mental events that come and go, the 6 knowables they're called. All of that happens unstoppably and effortlessly. You don't have to think, now I'm going to think about my thoughts. Now I'm going to focus my mind on that shirt in front of me. It appears automatically. Everything is known in this sphere, in the present moment, in this space, automatically. And that is called, that's what this author is referring to as pristine mind. It's called, or in the Tibetan, kadak rigpa. It's the fundamental mind. It's the fundamental nature of who we are. You can't stop it. It's going on all the time, wherever you are. Even when you're dreaming, it's a constant state of knowingness. In this case of dreams, you're aware of mental events, the dreams. It's unstoppable. It's continuous. And then what happens is that in that open space, in the present moment of knowingness, this space of pristine mind, mental events occur. Things like, what's for dinner? I'm angry at this person. I really like that movie. We have these thoughts that come and go, and they are like clouds that go across the sky. They're temporary. They're transitory. This is called ordinary mind, the thinking mind. The term is sem in Tibetan, and it's usually translated, especially in the tradition that we're working with here today, as ordinary mind. Sometimes that phrase translates other things, but we won't get into that. Okay? In the Nyingma's tradition, they usually translate it as sem, as ordinary mind. And ordinary mind is thinking mind. Thinking mind thinks this is good, that's bad, I want to go there, I don't want to go there, the other place. And all those thoughts arise and pass away. And the analogy for all of this, you see, is like the sky and clouds. The sky is always there, the blue sky. Clouds come and go. They pass across the sky and disappear. Sometimes they completely obscure the sky. Those are the mental events that obscure the pristine mind or punctuate it. They go across it. You're sitting right here and you're having this thought, my knee hurts. That thought goes, and then it's over. You're having this thought, what am I going to do when the meeting's over? And then the thought's over. The problem is, it's a figure ground game. It's like these thoughts are the figures. And the ground is the ground of our being. It's this sphere, this space that we're sitting in the middle of. We tend to notice the figures. It's like if you take a blank piece of paper and you draw something on it. You stop looking at the paper, you just see the drawing. You become aware of the figure, and you lose track of the ground. And that is what has happened to sentient beings. That's how confusion happens, is that we lose track of the very ground of our being and get lost. We identify with and become absorbed in the thoughts, the mental events, the passions, the anger, the stories, the lust, the envy, all these things, the hurt, the stories that we tell ourselves. And these stories have a number of qualities. First of all, they're transitory. They come and they go. One minute it's there and it seems very important, the next minute you've forgotten it. Second is, they are always about the past and the future. And even when they're about the present, they're really about the past and the future. There's just a slight little gap. When you think about the present, you're sort of slightly removed from it. You're looking at it as though, it had just happened. So they're always about the past and the future. And they're always driven by fundamental anxiety, a fundamental fear, a fear for my well-being. That's what drives all of these thoughts. And if you examine your thoughts, you'll see that even the most benign, even the happiest thoughts are lit by that fear for my continued well-being, as opposed to this fundamental open space that we're sitting in the middle of, lit by colors and sounds and shapes and all kinds of things, tremendous warmth and vitality and constantly changing. There's no hope and fear in it. It's just a constant presentation, very beautiful, of the six knowables. But thoughts are lit by this fundamental primordial fear, and it's really a fear about me, because that's what thoughts are all about. Thoughts are always about a hero or a heroine. Me, me and my well-being. What am I going to do tomorrow? What did I do yesterday? How am I doing? Am I going to be happy? Am I going to be sad? And the problem is that we have lost track of the ground of our being. And we've become so absorbed in thought, we've given our loyalty to it. And we think, this is me. This is who I am. I am my thoughts. I'm the person who has this virtue and that failing. I've got this problem, that opportunity. And it's all, we identify so much with the thoughts. They become, we think, in our thoughts, who we are. But they're not who we are. They are just these transitory things. I mean, can you remember what you were thinking even a month ago? Much less a year ago? Much less 5 years ago? I mean, it just passes, all of it. The only thing that stays constant is this present moment, this space, which is always full of these six knowables of sight, the beautiful colors of the world, the sounds, smells, tastes, touches, sensations, bodily sensations, and mental events. They just come and go in the space. The only thing that stays constant is this space. Everything changes within it. Thought tries to hold on to this or that, to the taste of that wonderful dinner, the bodily sensation of making love. We want it to go on forever, but nothing does. It all changes. Not only that, but all these things that we cling to go sour sooner or later. This is what's called samsara. We go round and around in this circle, pursuing pleasure, trying to avoid pain, and it's just a continual circle. That's what samsara means, is a circle. So the real purpose of meditation, you see, is to begin to switch our allegiance, to see the thought, because that you have to be aware, and to let it go, which is what it does. When you see a thought, it automatically, as they say in the text, self-liberates. It sort of goes poof, instantaneously. Now, one of the big mistakes we make is trying to be thoughtless. That's another big, ambitious thought. So you got to stop that. Don't try and be thoughtless. Just see them as they come and they go. You've got to be just purposeless, sitting there, being aware of all of it. That's the technique. That's the practice. Now, I'm talking about this because this chapter that we're reading here, that we had for tonight, is all about meditation. He starts out by saying, meditation is about experiencing reality and being real. What that means is not participating in the dreams of thoughts, of the ambitions, including the most pernicious and subtle ambition of all, which is the ambition to be spiritual, the ambition to be a good meditator. That's a really sneaky one. So you give up all of that. He says, and then he says, the key point is to develop sympathy for yourself. You could enjoy being yourself as you are, something rarely done. And the way in which you do that is by ceasing to punish yourself for having thoughts and mental events as you meditate. That's got to go. That way you begin to develop a kind of kindness toward yourself, that you allow yourself, your mind, to be just what it is and to watch it come and go. Just watch it come and go with no agenda. That's the thing. No agenda. No ambition. When you can do that, you are beginning to develop what in the tradition is called maitri, loving kindness for yourself. It is absolutely essential to do that in order to make progress on the path. Until one begins to do that, you are a slave to your ambition to improve, self-improvement. It's the worst vice we have. So he says we need to experience ourselves with kindness and with clarity. The terms for these are maitri and prajna in the Sanskrit. We see it so clearly, and it's so simple. It's effortless, really. The whole key, again and again, is effortlessness. Coming back, just like we did here tonight, and relaxing into the space of this present moment. I mean, I've got this in so many ways. Somebody sent me these 6 thoughts of Trunpa. Trunpa was a great 11th century Siddha. He was really wild. And it says things like, I can't remember all the 6 of them, but one is, don't dwell on the future, it never comes. Don't think about the past, it's gone. Don't try to control the present, you can't. And that's 3, but he's got 6. Something like, don't make plans, just be here in the present moment. And the last one is rest. Rest. And this from a great sage. Just rest in this. And constantly the injunction is rest in the nature. That means what we just did, in this space of the present moment. So in this chapter he talked about posture, and we went over posture. It's really helpful to have a good posture. I don't know why it works so well, but you will find, if you've got good posture, that your mind clears. There are lots of things you can do to help your mind just relax and clear. One is having good posture and relaxing the tension in your body before you start to practice. Being erect. There's a term in Tibetan, it's dudro. Dudro is the word for animal, and it means walking bent over on 4 legs. That's what dudro means. See, we're not dudro. We don't walk bent over on 4 legs. So the idea is that we should have a good head and shoulders, erect, upright, alert, cheerful. This is a big point. Again and again, cheerfulness. Boy, is that hard. I mean, don't we get depressed? Cheerfulness is so important on the path. It is what makes this path come alive. Again and again, we are enjoined to be cheerful. And in this chapter, he really does it beautifully. We're going to get to that. It's really a kick, I thought. He says, don't expect anything from your practice. You just do it. It is not a punishment, and it's not a reward. It is hard, tough joy. This is amazing, that you could actually be joyful in your practice. That when you sit in practice, we could be, I'm going to practice, like this. I'm going to grin and bear it, and I'm going to do my practice. And oh God, I got another 10 minutes. How can I do it? My knee hurts. But you could actually find a kind of solace, a kind of warmth in your practice, that it's protection from the terrors of thought, the unhappiness of thought. When you come back into the present, there's a warmth, a kindliness in this present moment, a safety in this present moment. Safety, it might not be a good word because it implies danger. I don't want to raise that specter. But there can be very much a feeling of warmth, of coming back to the present. That this is what's real, that you can trust it, and that in doing it, you're giving up the anxiety of all those thoughts, every fucking one of them. None of them are true. They are all lies. They are lies. I mean, sure, you have to pay the rent, that thought. But saying it over and over and over again because you're so anxious, that's the lie quality. That's the false. That's the giveaway. That's the telltale. See, that's why it's false. It's the anxiety that drives them. That's the lie. It's the anxiety about me and my survival. That's the lie. So you come back into this present moment and you're giving up that falsehood. And you can rely on it. You can trust it. We all can. And the whole point of this path is to switch our loyalty from these sneaky, deceptive, pernicious mental events, these fictions that we tell ourselves, all kinds. I'm a bad person. I'm hopeless, I've got this big problem. I'm going to fail. Nobody's going to like me. I'm never going to get anywhere on the path. Whatever it might be, we tell ourselves. To switch your loyalty from those stories to this present moment where there's enormous opportunity and things to do. To be involved with other people, to be creative in the world. He says this, the motivation to practice arises because each time you practice, there is a sense of joy and well-being. And there can be. There can be. When we first start to practice, we're too hard on ourselves. But as we begin to get into it more, there can very much be a sense of joy and well-being that you can actually like sitting down to practice. He says, having developed that kind of motivation, then you develop what's called Xinjiang. Xinjiang has a lot of meanings, but he describes that as the sense of relaxation and joy that comes from sitting practice. He says, on the whole, the practice of meditation is about being here, right here, precisely, with joy and humor. He used to look out at us, this teacher, and he used to say, please cheer up. Please cheer up. I mean, sometimes when I start practicing in the morning, I go like this. I can see myself in the reflection in the picture in front of me, and you try and cheer. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and we're so depressed and glum. It's the hardest time often getting out of bed. It's when the mind starts kicking out all those depressed thoughts. And the trick, again and again, if you want to progress along the path, cheer up. He used to just tell us that over and over again. Please cheer up, he used to say. And I just love what's coming, the end here. He says, meditation is not at all goal-oriented. The fact that you have no idea what is going to happen, no real idea about the goal, seems to be the saving grace. You just sit. You just do it. That's another slogan. Just do it. It works. It's like water dripping on a stone, You just do it. It works. He says, we're all crazy. How do we get out of that? Purely by sitting. By sitting, you begin to develop more humor, more relaxation, and ultimately more mindfulness. He says mindfulness practice depends on your cheerfulness. Now he's using mindfulness in the broader sense of being aware of the present moment. The idea of mindfulness and sitting practice is joyfulness. I mean, can we be joyful? That's pretty, could be a tall order, don't you think? He says, the more relaxation and humor there is, the more you begin to understand. There is less chatter. The more relaxation and humor, there is less chatter, due to the very fact that you don't suppress yourself. You don't suppress yourself as you sit. You're not trying to step on yourself and suppress things. You just let it go. Relaxation is the key. When you relax, it all quiets down. If you try and suppress thought, emotion, mental events, then they really come at you. There's a famous story. There was an 11th century Tibetan saint named Milarepa. He was a yogi, lived in a cave, and his teacher sent him off to spend the rest of his life in a cave, which he did. And he sang his teachings in songs. And in any event, there are many stories that he sang about. One of them is that he was attacked by a demoness. This demoness came, and she was ugly and she was fierce, and she bit his toe, and she wouldn't let go, you know. And he preached to her. He said, "Don't you realize I'm a holy yogi? You know, you're impeding my progress. You're going to incur lots of bad karma. You should be helping me." And she says, "Oh, you're just trying to get rid of me." You know. Finally, he accepts her, you know, as part of his life. And she turns into a goddess and helps him. And this is how we treat those demons that attack us in our mind, that we want to get rid of. If you try and get rid of them, they won't let go of your toe. They keep coming back at you again and again. But if you accept them and make them part of your awareness, then they become your allies. They become part of the scenery. He says, that seems to be the basic point, less suppression. In order to attain nirvana, or freedom, you have to suppress yourself less. You do this by means of the sitting practice. In the beginning, it might be painful, but the end product is more enjoyable. And then this is the quote that I love from this chapter. He says, when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he wasn't tormenting himself. He was enjoying himself. For 6 years, he had a great time. I mean, really. The only time he had any second thoughts was when he spent 40 days wondering how he could communicate the joy he had experienced. And when he got enlightened, you know, he spent 40 days. He didn't figure he could communicate his enlightenment to anybody. It was beyond words. But he's calling it the joy he experienced. He was not sure how people could be made to understand such joy and wakefulness. Isn't that wild? That the Buddha sat for all that time under the Bodhi tree, really, really enjoying it. I always pictured him doing it, you know, sort of grinning and bearing it and then getting enlightened, and it was all over. It is a very joyful occasion when somebody presents the Dharma. Once you are fully here with mindfulness and awareness, it is known as holding Buddha in the palm of your hand. Buddha is right here. And finally, he concludes with the importance of practice. And he says there is no way one can attain freedom without sitting practice. To work with egolessness, we need training in letting go of our ground. That means our frame of reference, our ideas about who we are and where we're going, our past, our future, our goals, all of it. It all has to go. Because it's all part of the baloney of these mental events, sem, ordinary mind, these stories that we tell ourselves. There is a need for the rug to be pulled out from under our feet. Meditation is the only way to do that. He says meditation practice has to be considered a highlight of all your activities, the most important and the best thing you do. So we could have a discussion. Pretty fierce, would you say? Uncompromising. Anybody want to say anything? We'll pass a mic. Lane.
Well, thank you for tonight. The guided meditation, the talk, it was all great. I read the reading before. Okay, here's my question. I had what I considered to be a very good sit tonight. I felt like I had gotten past a big stumbling block of mine, and as a result, I felt some joy. Or so I thought. I began to question that because, as usually happens when we experience joy, we have a smile, and which is a kind of tension. There was a tension in my face. So as I was observing this, I was experiencing joy and letting go of the tension, and experiencing joy again and letting go of the tension. And then it occurred to me if it was really the joy that was creating that tension, if it wasn't something additional, and that addition being this need I have to pat myself on the back, which is a kind of neurosis. So I continued with my sit and let go of that, and what was left for me was a kind of trust, a trust in what the moment had to offer, a trust that I would receive what I need for my practice, don't have to worry about it. There was just this trust. So my question for you is, I'm just wondering if what Trunpa Rinpoche meant by joy is perhaps closer to what I'm calling trust. What exactly? What's your understanding? What exactly did he mean by joy?
Well, trying to read his mind. I think you're right. That trust, joy. The thing is this: as long as we're trying to sort of manipulate things for me, these problems come up. And me, you see, only lives in that little mind, sem. That's the term, little mind in the Soto Zen tradition. It's the only place it is. That's where all this issue of, how am I doing? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? That's where it lives. And when we give that up and we come back into big mind, which is, that's this pristine mind, Lane comes from the Soto Zen tradition, where they talk a lot about big mind and little mind, same thing we've been talking about tonight. And when you come back to big mind, all those mental events go, including the mental events about me, about my self-concern, about how am I doing, how's my progress, am I getting somewhere, am I going to become enlightened? Then joy and trust are not personal possessions, but they become properties of the field, of this open mind, this open awareness that we're sitting in the middle of right now, aware of this whole room. They become qualities of that. And in fact, this is talked about again and again in the teachings. They talk about sukha in the Sanskrit, sukha, which means joy, great exaltation, one teacher translates it. But it's usually translated as joy, sukha. Great joy, mahasukha. Dewa Chen in the Tibetan. And it's a property of this field. It's not a property of thought. Thought, the little thoughts, those are all about me, my ego. And those things are very transitory. They come and they go. And when you put your faith in them, they will betray you over and over again. They will give you pleasure for a moment and then they screw you. But this quality of the field is so beautiful full of color and shape and sound and smells and all of that. Everything. And thoughts and mental events. All these things arising in the present moment. That's where the joy is. It's a quality of this field. And we need to be, this whole path is about switching our allegiance from thought to this. And the way we do it again and again, because you see, we have this habit of devolving into thought. We've been doing it for a long, long time. And so what we do is again and again we find ourselves thinking about me and my problem and this and that. And then you realize you're doing it. And you just let it go. And you're here. You're back in the present moment. That's the practice. The practice really is come back. I think I'd like to get it tattooed on my knuckles. Come back, You come back from thought to this again and again. That's the practice. And this is where the joy is. This is where, what else is there to trust except this?
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Alan. Did we put new batteries in there? We did.
That brings to mind the T-shirt where it says in the front, "If you lose your mind," and the back it says, "Come back."
Yeah, it's great.
About joy, I was thinking perhaps one could broaden that out into a sense of enjoyment, which could encompass enjoying everything we experience in our meditation practice. It could also encompass just a sense of well-being, as you mentioned. I think it's also important not to second-guess ourselves, kind of doubting what our experience was and then trying to figure out what that was all about. I think what saves us from all that second-guessing is just the simple technique of letting go and coming back. Whether it's letting go of the thought about tension in our face or about feeling good, whatever it is, it really doesn't matter, right? It's all about seeing it and coming back. And we could enjoy that whole process of working with the instructions of meditation. That whole kit and caboodle could be enjoyable. And the emotion of joy can be contained in that. It can be a part of that. Not necessarily, but can be a part of that.
Thank you. Well said. Terry.
I have a... is there any reason... I remember talking about this some months ago, and it struck me that the term I kept wanting to use was fundamental happiness, as opposed to a sort of egoistic happiness. And I'm just curious if you know of any reason, or can think of any reason why we couldn't call it fundamental happiness based on the teachings.
I think we could.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read Pristine Mind, Our Pristine Mind, he's calling it unconditional happiness. It's the same thing. You're calling it fundamental.
Yeah.
It's a property of the field that we're in. It's not something that's dependent on me and my circumstances. I think, I think it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, and I like the way that you describe it too, in the sense that, there's a sense of, when you rest in that sort of fundamental happiness, there's a sense of no longer not struggling with everything, not struggling with your thoughts, not struggling with the world and trying to make it a certain way. It's like I want to say almost like a feeling of being in the right, like everything being as it should be, or as it is, Yeah,
I think I've heard that before. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. 1-1.
So fundamental happiness, does that mean that our true nature is happiness? Or we are beings without, void of any of pre-existing nature?
We are beings what?
That's void of any pre-existing nature.
Or we are void of, devoid of any...
Devoid of any, pre-existing nature, good, bad, happy, unhappy. So if we talk about fundamental nature, fundamental happiness, does that presuppose that we have a nature of, our nature is happiness? Or we are just emptiness without any pre-existing, definition? Okay, and then second question I have is, second things I thought about, I heard you repeat cheer up so many times, and it's actually so hard to do.
What's hard to do?
Cheer up.
Cheer up.
Yeah,
yes.
because we have a lot of mental event that is already, it's boiling and has this momentum going on. And, we constantly bring it into the existence and reinforcing that existence of that mental event. So to drop everything just to cheer up, that's why it's very, 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 very difficult. But that's really essential things to do, is like, the meditation we do, And this is like a decision to make. Like the choice is not to give a F about everything else.
What, sorry, there's what?
Not to give an F about everything else, yeah.
I still couldn't hear the last part, but... huh?
I don't want to say it over. You did it.
Not to give an F about anything else.
So, go ahead, you answer. Alan.
That's her question.
I know, but it was her question, but would you give an answer?
Well, what's the everything else you're talking about?
Just make a decision to not to care about other things, and the most important thing is to be in the state of, so anything that comes to us, then you have the screen there, right there, to screen it. You have the filter right there, and that if that filter is existed, and then yeah. But on the other hand, it's a little bit hard because it's just let mental event come and go. Isn't that supposed to be the way we don't resist anything, right? So do you make a decision wanting to be happy and stay in the state? So any mental event that comes to you, you kind of have the screen there, have a filter there to filter it through. This is good, this is not good, this is good, this is not good,
No, you let go of all that. There's no good or bad.
Yeah. So
no should or shouldn't. You let go of all that. If as soon as you get caught up in good or bad, should or shouldn't, you're lost.
But then we said that to take a refuge in to be a Buddhist that's exactly what I mean, isn't it? Is to set a legion of not to care about everything else. Is it like so?
You might care about everything.
It's kind of like comforting.
You might care about everything very much, even more, about what's going on in life in the present. Because oftentimes we're so lost in thought, worries about the past and the future, that we don't give proper attention to what is really happening in the moment in our lives.
And so, okay, so what about the first question I have? The fundamental.
I don't know what the first question was anymore. I'm sorry. Huh?
No, that's the second one. The first one is the fundamental. If we have a fundamental happiness, what does that mean exactly? Is it in our nature? Yeah. That's the first question.
Yeah. Anybody want to answer that? Sarah does.
We do have basic goodness, and I guess about the quote-unquote fundamental happiness, there are some descriptions of some people like, I don't know, Jill Bolt Taylor, you know, she wrote in her book, or what was the name of the book? She was a neuroscientist who had a stroke.
Oh, yeah.
And no, but it was interesting because she, like, there were certain parts of her brain that were sort of stopping, like the verbal circles that we usually go in, and she felt like just almost just chill about it. I mean, and at the same time, you know, she obviously needed thoughts to function to some extent, so she was able to get herself help. But it was sort of interesting. She said that underneath it all, when she didn't have the thoughts spinning around, she just felt kind of chill and like enjoy even.
Chill doesn't sound like happiness. I don't know what you mean by chill.
I'm sorry. She did say joy. I just, for me, chill made sense to me. Sorry. CT?
Chill is a good word.
I think I
CT.
understand your question, and this is actually remind me a little bit. I don't remember whether it was here or whether it was in Dharma Junkies that you talked about this. And I was teaching on it, and the problem I think that we're running into when we, and you'll have to excuse me because I have a bad neck, so I can't really turn all the way around. The issue that I think I had before with using the term fundamental happiness was that people, when you say the word happiness, you immediately conjure up ideas of happiness that are very ego-driven, right? So when the connotation of happiness is one of I'm happy because this happened to me, because you know I got a new job, or I got a I got married, or I'm like happy because something happened, and I think that when the kind of happiness, when you're talking about fundamental happiness, this is completely letting go of egoistic happiness. It's not based on happiness that comes from something that happened to you or something that relates to your life. It's happiness that comes from letting go of all these desires, letting go of the anxieties and the wants that we have, that our ego comes up with. And the moment we start letting go of those things, those are the things that cause all the struggle for us. And when we, in the absence of that struggle, we sit and we can experience the enjoyment of the present. I mean, there are other ways to describe it too. There's like, equanimity or peace, a pleasantness.
So we have the ability to experience, but we don't have the nature to be happiness.
I think that in the way
Can you
that
repeat
I'm.
what she said? Because we can't hear you. One.
So she's saying, she's asking whether or not we have the nature, whether it is in our nature to have that happiness. And I would say that it is our nature. That is a description of our basic state. Right. So, like it's just a way of describing. It's probably a good way of describing, how our basic our Buddha nature is, our open awareness. There is a positivity to the experience of that we sometimes I think could call fundamental happiness.
Yeah, well, you just said it. It's not external. It's not outside of ourselves. It's an inherent. It's in the nature. Buddha nature has been described. There's a word that's used which is often misinterpreted as bliss. There's a blissful, which means a very strong, powerful sense of well-being, and that's part of that nature. The nature of, how do we feel when we experience, even briefly, being open, completely open, for a moment. There's not a care. Not a care in the world. That openness shades into joy or happiness or bliss, and that's inherent. That's the nature. That's part of Buddha nature.
But you're sure that it's not certain time after such a stressful, there's a rebound, right? So you have a very, like rebound. I'm explaining right now. So if you have a very like like a lot of mental event, right, and then all of a sudden you experience not mental event, then you have the rebound of enjoying the moment with no mental event. So my question still hasn't been answered, because I feel that the Buddhism has been saying about the nothingness, emptiness. So what exactly? Because even that we are empty without any presupposed nature to or inclination to happiness. Our happiness only comes after stressful event, and we see the contrast of it.
Wait. Pass the mic.
So when Wen is talking about happiness, like dualism, right? She thinks that there can't be basic happiness because that would be still the dualistic happiness. But there's another happiness that the teachings talk about, which is the fundamental, which is a different between. It's not dependent on anything else. So the happiness is not because you are free of unhappiness or you're free of anything you're clinging to. It's something that we already have. It doesn't need the dependency of other events.
Very well said. Thank you. Thank you, Isabella. Yeah, this happiness is not dependent on anything. It's just a quality of reality. If you call it happiness, joy, they just say that it's a quality of the field. And it's not happiness as opposed to unhappiness. Like, now I got $1 million and I'm happy. Now I lost all my money and I'm unhappy. It's not in that sphere. It's just a quality of enjoyment of this field that we inhabit. And it really depends on our ability to shift our loyalty from our thoughts, our anxious thoughts about the past and the future, about me and mine, to simple, open awareness that we practice together of coming back to this present moment. We just come back and rest here. And we shift our loyalty from the thoughts to this, effortless, restful. They call it resting in the nature. And that's the way it's done. The only way. We should end, and we have some snacks. Anybody want to say anything before we close? Any announcements? Carrie.
I actually just wanted to mention, and I don't know if we've talked about it, but so we do. I have this website called the Sitting Project, and we do sits in Times Square, meditations in Times Square. So we have one coming up on June 16th, Saturday, June 16th at 2 p.m. Sarah and I will definitely be there. So it is in front of the red steps, where there's a statue of Father Duffy. And we sit down right in front of the Father Duffy statue. We show up at 2 p.m., we sit down for 40 minutes, we get up, and we're done.
Between 46 and 47th Street.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So if you don't know the Reds, the TKTS like stuff is right around there, the red steps. So it's for me, I would say that it's a meditator's bucket list item. In case you have never meditated in Times Square, I think I highly recommend it. It's a very rich place to practice. There's a lot of stuff going on, as you can imagine. But I think that one of the things that I find most interesting is that it adds to some of the anxiety. You're sitting outside. There are people running around. It makes you self-conscious. It's all this stuff. And what tends, a lot of people have exactly the same reaction. You're just shaking your head. And you go and if people are like, why would you choose to go to Times Square to meditate. But it's exactly because of that. When you go and you sit in the middle of this, in the belly of the beast, as Joe Maurizio likes to call it, you find too that sense of settling into your seat, that sense of meditation, the same way that when we sit down and meditate regularly, it takes a few minutes oftentimes for us to settle into the meditation and to relax. That same sense can be found in Times Square too, right. And I find that to be a sort of profound experience as a meditator. So I highly encourage everyone to join.
So send me a notice. We'll put it in the email.
Yes.
Also, I'm just mentioning Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche, who's a wonderful teacher, talking about getting ready to prepare for death. You know this, Isabella? He said, when you die, there's a whole description of what happens in the bardo states, the states between death and rebirth. And there are 3 bardos of death. There's the painful bardo of dying. That's the process of your body actually dying and your mind shutting down. And then there's the bardo of reality, which most people don't experience unless they've done a lot of practice, like really the practices that we're working on here. You do a lot more of this. And then the last one, which most people who are not going to get enlightened after death experiences the bardo of becoming. And that's where you get the 49 days, And in the bardo of becoming, it's like a dream state. It's purely mental. And in the first half of it, these 49 days, which is figurative, because we're not on the earth anymore. It's in the mental state. But they're meditation days, they call them. In the first half, you see yourself as you were as a child of 6 or 7, and you're being buffeted by the winds of karma. One minute you can be in Istanbul, the next minute you can be in Peoria, you can be angry, sad, and happy, whatever. It's like a dream, and everything changes very fast. And in the second half, you're supposed to see yourself as in the body of a 7-year-old that you will have in the next life. And it's very, very frightening because there are loud noises, there's winds, constant violent change that can happen, and it's supposed to be scary. And Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche said, if you want to get ready for that, go meditate in Times Square. He did?
Check it out by going to Times Square.
So we should end. Let's end with a bow. Thank you all. Are we going to dedicate the merit? This is something that we do in Mahayana Buddhism, which is that we give away the merit that we've accumulated here to other sentient beings. And you see, the thing is that it's kind of like giving away your ego, which you don't want anyhow, right? The ego says, no, I want the merit. I want the merit. Let me keep it. But by giving it away, you're defeating your own egotism and getting that much closer to waking up into the present moment. So we'll say this chant. If you don't want to say it, that's perfectly fine too. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory